Rob is a retired aerospace engineer, turned skeptic and atheist activist. He's had over 90 articles published by the Skeptical Inquirer, as well as other skeptic and humanist magazines and media. He writes about contemporary skeptical issues and has interviewed many people renowned in the field, such as Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye the Science Guy, Richard Dawkins, Edward Teller, Seth Andrews, and John Delancey. And for those of you who may not know, John Delancey played Q on the Star Trek.
A god, a real god.
So Rob was given various papers from various skeptic and humanist groups and conventions, including DragonCon, and 4 times at CSICon, which is the annual Science and Skepticism conference in Las Vegas. And what he presented at Las Vegas is not staying in Las Vegas. He's going to present it here to us this morning. Also, he's been interviewed about his work on various podcasts and YouTube shows, including The Skeptic Zone, The Big Picture, Point of Inquiry, The Thinking Atheist, and at recoveryfromreligion.org. So you can see a lot of his material in archive at those sites. So I want to thank you all for coming this morning, and I want you to please give a warm welcome to Rob Palmer.
So unfortunately, I couldn't get the audio worked out, so I have some videos in here. I'm just going to give them by those. I was going to say that Eric said this is the presentation I gave at it's SciCon, but actually it's like double the length because of all this video. So some of that's not going to be clear. But I also injected some other information because I was very time limited at SciCon. The speakers were limited to 20 minutes, and here it's more open-ended than that. So this is more than the people at the conference heard. So let's go. And that's not working now. Did something get distracted? Good.
Can you just 2 page down to move?
It's not working either. What's PowerPoint over internet? No. Sorry. Okay, good. Was it on?
No, I repaired it.
Okay.
So,
Okay, here we go. So,
but it's just actually that the way it's that's not the way.
that's right. Okay. So, I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I'm a career in aerospace engineering, designing spacecraft, and then U.S. Navy business system. In 2016, I joined the Wikipedia and became a skeptical activist officially, which I talked about that here and started with people for the project. And I think some people did that. 2 years later, retired as a columnist, partly without work for the field skeptics by Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and I write as the well-known skeptic. And as Eric said, I've published a lot of places. And 4 of the articles I write are about something that I'm going to talk to today. I've also spoken at conferences and Eric mentioned all that. So let's talk about 3 recent seemingly unrelated incidents of groups of people in different cultures claiming they were victims of mysterious attacks. Right? So the first one, did a 4-foot-tall roller skating helmeted monkey man with metal claws and glowing red eyes, but not wings like the human ones, attacked people throughout New Delhi and surrounding towns in India. This is back in 2001. Much more recently, have thousands of girls in hundreds of schools across Iran been poisoned by the government or perhaps by the citizens to incriminate the government. This just happened at the end of last year, the beginning of this year. Or going on for the last 7 or so years, have thousands of U.S. government employees and their family members in Cuba and all around the world, including behind White House gates, been attacked and inflicted with long list of injuries that goes on and on, including brain damage over the past 7 years by sci-fi enemy weapons wielded by undisclosed assailants for unknown reasons. So we're getting down to all this thing. So let's look at the first case. The monkey man of Dell. So yes, I had never heard of this before, but this was a thing. This happened in 2001. There were numerous reports of the creature. Some claimed it was actually a human monkey, a monkey-human hybrid, which was attacking people, leaving them with scratches, bite marks, and as you can see at the bottom here, this says at least one man. At the end, I think 3 or 4 people died, running in fear in the middle of the night from this creature falling downstairs or stairwells or tops of buildings. Witnesses gave descriptions. They varied greatly. These are 2 that were fairly similar in height, 4'6" and 5'7", which people said was 8 foot tall. Some people said it was wearing clothes and roller skates, helmets, glowing eyes. I mean, they almost always said it had metal claws. These are police sketches. So police took witness IDs and passed these on. The media showed where the attacks had been reported. It spread first in New Delhi, and then the media went crazy. Well, maybe it looked like this, stoking even more fear. That made the incident reports spread to other cities again, to Mumbai. All right, and now this is a video with sound, but the sound is actually in Hindi, so this is okay to play this one. The closed captions are in English. So this is a report that's done later, but it's about the local person talking about this story. These are witnesses to something that was happening, talking about the fact. So yeah, the new development there is the report said this seems to be a mix between human and animal. So, is there a more likely explanation than that actually was a human hybrid? Probably. So, some more information about this incident. There were power outages during the hot weather, and people were sleeping where they normally wouldn't, on the porches or on the rooftops out in the dark. Police had circulated, as I showed you, the images. And they created a reporting hotline where to get a reward for information leading to the capture. $1,000 equivalent US dollars, a lot of money in that area. And so, of course, the police are offering the reward. How could this not be a real thing? And as I showed you that one picture of the giant monkey, media was full of inflammatory reports and speculation that people believe this even real. All gave rise to hoaxes and contributed to other reports where, because these things are spreading fear. So the current version of the Wikipedia article, I'm going to go to Wikipedia bit in this presentation. because as I mentioned, I talked about the real skeptics on Wikipedia, and that was a volunteer job I had, where we add Wikipedia to add science content and skepticism and remove claims and conspiracies to be suicide. So our team worked on a lot of these articles, and we're always cognizant of what's going on Wikipedia regarding these claims. So the current version of the Wikipedia article is pretty reasonable, right? It said it was unknown anomaly, reported to be unknown, which wasn't reports. And one paragraph in the lead actually says it has been described as an example of necessary. So that term is interesting. Let's look at it. Illness or injury without clear physical cause, which occurs in a population associated with many types. That is one of them, necessary. Also sometimes called contagion, epidemic hysteria, social contagion. It generally is called asocial panic when this happens. And if there's actually symptoms, there's different ways of describing that. Functional neurological disorder or mass psychogenic illness. All right. In those two cases where there's actually injuries that are caused by something different than what you think it is, how are injuries or illnesses caused by something that's not real? There's two ways about that. One is the nocebo effect. So anybody heard of something before? People know the placebo effect, right? So yeah, this is the opposite of placebo effect. Placebo effect states that you can be cured of certain things that are not very easily measurable, pains, or you might feel better, that kind of thing. By thinking something you're taking will cause that, even though it doesn't do anything at all, it might just be sugar, right? So the nocebo effect is the opposite. If you're given something and then say, oh, that was rat poison, sorry, you very well may have a stomach ache and stuff. I mean, this is what happens. The other thing is reframing, right? These people may have just scratched themselves. And because this is all on the news, oh, I was attacked. They have reframed what caused their injury or illness. You might just wake up sick one morning and think, oh, it must be that rat poison person said they gave me. So you may just have been sick anyway. All right, let's look at something a little closer in time, not so home here. So that happened in 2001, the Monkey Man thing. And by the way, it just stopped. When the tower was restored, people started sleeping when they normally slept, and reports weren't made anymore. It exponentially just decreased to zero. You never lost quality. It's the typical thing with those kinds of panics. So Iranian school reporting. This is something. Raise your hand if you've heard about this in the news. Not half of the people. Okay, that's more than most people. I actually asked this in Psychogenic and I heard a group of about 600 people. And I had never heard of it before. In fact, the psychologist who I'm going to be talking about a little bit about the next topic, Havana syndrome, called me and said, Rob, do you know about the Iranian school poisons going on now? I said, no, it's in the news. So I looked into it, started working on the issue. So there were civil unrest and protests against the government of Iran associated with the death and police custody of Masa Amini back in September, so just a little over a year ago. Right, so women, including schoolgirls, played a key role in these demonstrations across the country. Well, before you know it, people in schools, the schoolgirls, were claiming that they were doing poisons, and this involved many schools, many cities, many people, and it was reported widely in the media. And nobody had been arrested. There wasn't any exact evidence of it, but it was history poisonings. They were all skills. This is a map that was publicized showing the number of attacks, the number of people who said that they had been poisoned in many cities across the country. 100 schools, 100 cities, and literally thousands of girls, all starting last year and going to the beginning of this year. Citizens blame the government blamed the people, saying it was a false flag operation to make the government look better. Mass arrests were actually made in March. All of a sudden they decided, oh, we never did this, and they arrested a bunch of people. And everything stopped. And interesting, if you try to Google the story from back in April after the arrest, there's no reports of any more reports of poisonings, but there's also no reports of the trials or what happened to these people, which is there. So this is a case here where you're seeing a woman's committee podcast saying it was biological terror and cereal poisonings as fact, right? The world ordinary government and said government has to stop this. And this is a video which I'm not going to play, but most of you won't be able to speak of. But showing the current reports from the media of the witnesses being taken into hospitals and such with gas masks. So we'll go past that. So back to Wikipedia. The original version of the Wikipedia article about this topic was named chain poisonings in girls' schools. I didn't understand the chain, so actually I had to change. Probably some local word, but I think they meant cereal, in order. But they said it was deliberate attacks and girls have been poisoned, suspicious manner. And all the reports were just from the local media about the poisoning happening. But is there a more explanation? Well, it was actually mass poisonings of young girls exposed to their reason or another. Well, all right, this is an interview I had with the psychology expert on the subject, but he says, no, all the signs fit to social hysteria and panic because of that. There were no deaths. People were taken to hospital sick, but then released. And in fact, there was no poison evidence of the family. So the role of skeptics had a large impact on changing the tone of this page. It used to say changing poisonings. Now the name of the article is Iranian School of Mescaline Reports. And it says alleged attacks. It gives the reports of what the government had said, that they sent doctors in and scientists to evaluate it. And couldn't find any evidence. It was probably with stress, anxiety, other psychological factors, and they used magic words, mass psychogenic illness. Right? And there's a lot of similarity between this and unbelievable other mass poisonings in girls' schools across the Islamic world for decades. And the psychologists believe this because you're more susceptible to stress and anxiety if you're in a marginalized population. There's nobody marginalized in a Muslim majority country than girls. So it's interesting. In those schools, if there are any male teachers or whatever, they don't suffer these attacks in those organizations. So let's look at something much more closely. So could this diagnosis, which was fairly short term, one was for months, another one was for the better portion of the year, can this apply to something that happened over 7 years? And not in some third world country. This happened in the United States, right? Supposedly one of the most technically sophisticated countries in the world. Could this have happened here, where the government says that attacks happened that didn't happen? People are claiming injuries that didn't happen. Well, let's look at that. So this is a little report which actually shows President Trump blaming Cuba, and he did that right off the bat. I mean, there was really no evidence yet, but he popped in as soon as the reports were released. Yep, Cuba did it, and he did it with sonic weapons. There was no scientist saying anything about sonic weapons, but that's what happened. So the media goes crazy, right? Sonic attacks in Cuba. Speculation on how, if there was such a weapon, how it could possibly work. Canadian diplomats in the embassy next door then started to also claim that they were making it. The first-hand reports in the media. This is what it felt like to be hit by these weapons, right? And as the stories were publicized, more and more people were claiming that they were victims. And then this became a pretty political situation, right? Our diplomats were withdrawn from Cuba, and Cuban diplomats were kicked out of the United States. So unfortunately, you're not going to hear the sound. But the acoustic sound was reported by an early victim saying, "This is what I heard right before I got sick." Let's go on. So Cuba denied any involvement with this. And this was a little report showing there were mental people saying, no, there's no evidence of what you're saying actually happened. So interestingly, the original version of the Wikipedia article, once it was written about this was going on in Cuba in October 2017, it showed a lot of skepticism. Right? They put sonic device in air quotes. Right? They said it breaks the laws of physics, according to some scientists. They even used the term anti-hijab illness. But in fact, that did not last long because the U.S. government, the Trump administration, hired people and sent them their diplomats who claimed they were effective So these medical people hired by the US came up with the conclusion that, yes, this was a new syndrome never seen before. And in fact, maybe it wasn't microwaves, they're sonic, it might have been microwave. They said that's their main suspect. This is the JAMA, right? The Journal of the American Medical Association. So, you know, we get published in this and it's seen as the real deal. The problem was there was criticisms from other scientists publishing in other publications, saying that there were gross methodological flaws here, which made their conclusions nonsense. But media didn't care about that, right? They just cared about the JAMA report. The Journal of the American Medical Association said it was true. So the reports just went on all of that year. People were claiming specific injuries, that they had lost their hearing. There was this interesting report at the bottom that says that that we have now proof by sickness intelligence that we've intercepted that Russia was behind this. Back in 2018, no story like this ever came up again, by the way. So what happened? The government went back and they doubled down. They got the same researchers to put another set of people together to look at this from another animal, and they actually did MRIs and they found brain differences. So therefore, some people were talking about maybe this was psychogenic illness. They said, no, that's impossible. Only psychogenic or psychosomatic was it's unlikely. This is from a real weapon. We don't know what it is. There has to be a real weapon. Again, other scientists pushed back on this report published in JAMA, saying that erroneous conclusions, bad methodology, and there were no psychologists in the team. Anyone who mentioned mass psychogenic illness as a possibility was kicked off the team to begin with. Kind of cherry picking your experts, right? And you're going to come up with a conclusion that those experts understand. So again, the media is what now the proof that brains were changed by literally the pathogens, right? Distinctly different brains MRI the Los Angeles Times. So this gave the right for people in the United States and Canada to sue the government because they didn't get protected from these weapons. So making it even worse, in 2020, the National Academy of Sciences doubled down, tripled down on what JAMA had before. And they did their own evaluation and they said, well, likelihood of mass psychogenic illness as an explanation is not reasonable because it needs to be established from sufficient evidence and, as a pilot, could not be inferred immediately by the absence of other causal mechanisms and lack of definitive structure. That is exactly the opposite of what the psychologists say. The psychologists say there's no proof of anything else that is mass. So they're saying we need some proof of mass psychogenic illness, like an impossibility. So that committee also said, oh, it's not sonic or microwaves, it's pulsed RF energy. They came up with another thing they just made up. So of course, the news media just went crazy with that. Okay, microwaves, pulsed energy, all sorts of stuff like that. Microwaves behind it. It took a year and a half for the government to release the audio for public review. They had the technical experts looking at the audio. And because they were all tech people, they were looking at spectrums and trying to define what instrumentation could make these kind of sounds. When they had come up with all guesses, well, what this report shows, what you're not going to see, is talking about they released it. Actually, I'll let it run a bit short. Let's see the last image without there. It's interesting. So what he's basically saying is, they couldn't prove what kind of weaponry caused all of this. But then they finally sent it to a different kind of a scientist, an entomologist. And what did the entomologists say? So the entomologists played the sound, heard the sounds, and they said, oh, that sounds familiar. Maybe I'd call up some other ones I have of something similar to this. And it turns out it was just a local cricket. And cicada. So it took a year and a half for that to be released. Yeah, not a microwave, was a sonic weapon.
Microwave cricket.
So people don't like to admit they made mistakes, especially the U.S. government and the Trump administration. They basically didn't acknowledge this. No, we heard this sound, it's definitely as well. The media just talked about more and more cases, more diplomats are being reported. Maybe it was microwaves or not, they just went on for another year. So then there was a Senate Intelligence Committee led by Mark Rubio. And, he absolutely said, no, there's medically confirmed cases of traumatic brain injury. That was the report I gave before, which was supposed to be, like other doctors, full of methodological flaws. Didn't care about that. So he was pointing, no, it has to be real attacks. And by the way, we hate Cuba. So, that was the thing. So then it spread from Cuba. Because the State Department started to warn the diplomats all over the world. If you hear any strange sound, even a weird sound, you feel any weird symptoms, something that you've not experienced before, or you think it's out of place, tell us. So the reports started flooding in, including from the United States. CIA also warned its people. The Pentagon warned its people. So more and more reports coming in. You feel any weird illness, who doesn't have? You get tinnitus, you have a headache, you get migraines. All of a sudden, it was the reframing thing. It's I'm being attacked. So this was put into U.S. law at the end of 2021. That's a little photography. So let me go to the main points here. The government passed to help American victims afflicted by neurological attacks, or the Havana Acts, unanimously in the Senate and the House, and by this time Biden was president, and he signed it. So, this put in concrete that there were neurological attacks against Americans that were at that time ongoing, supposedly. And of course, the media just kept going on into 2022. Although there were people who were pushing back, experts panel convening outside of the government saying, no, mass psychogenic illness is unlikely. Others were saying it was likely, it was back and forth. So 60 Minutes did one of the most ridiculous, unskeptical reports I personally saw, which was 20 minutes of their 60-minute show. And it was all about, this is happening, it's happened all over the world, the government has no way to protect people. And it ended with a little clip of the camera pointing out the White House gates. Because people at the White House claimed they had their and saying nobody, including the president, said it. There was not a skeptical point of view. All of those other scientists pointing out that this is not likely what's happening in that whole entire report.
There he is.
So, that being said, is there a more likely explanation for this? That was actually some sci-fi weapon which might have been found or determined to be able to do this. Well, scientists, which had been pushing back on this for a long time, as I mentioned. Right, they're slamming the reports, they were calling it sci-fi. They said the sonic weapons couldn't do that. Scientists were doubting it. Cuba did its own investigation and called it science fiction. There were some reports when the cricket smoker came out. I like the Times headline, what's a science supposed to do when sound evidence isn't sound? Because they have been reporting for to find that that's true. This is a report which ends there. 15 neuroscientists are saying neither microwaves nor sonic weapons could do what these people are saying happens. So, and 2 years before that 60-minute report I talked about, this book was published. This is by Robert Bartholomew, a psychologist, and Robert Bale, a neurologist. Actually, subtitled "Mass Psychogenic Illness and the Real Story Behind NBC Mystery." So this never got reported on. Very few book reviews were done, and apparently the journalists can't Google it, because if you Google Lab syndrome, skeptic or hoax, this book comes up immediately. And I don't see how anyone can read this book and still believe that that's happened. I did a report on the skeptical inquirer, and a good portion of the book talks about mass psychogenic illness through history and all the red flags that are present in a lot of syndrome, as well as talking about the details that are going on in the body. So part of the stuff that was in that book, we're talking about what other scientists had said was wrong. Again, this is back in 2020, and they were still talking like this is real in 2022. So talk about that the studies had critical design flaws, inappropriate controls, inflated conclusions, and lack of evidence, right? And that they promoted exotic explanations, not grounded in conventional research methodologies or proven by practice. One of the expressions that Robert Bartholomew likes to say is, when someone tells you that you hear hoofbeats, they immediately go to zebras instead of horses. Like the common thing, which would be really likely, we just ignore that. They want to attack. He says they want the unicorns. Nothing that would make us speech, but doesn't even exist. Right. Another thing that the book talks about that the committees came up with novel clinical entities without any foundation, and they suggested that the diplomats developed brain damage. But when a doctor looked at the studies, there was no change in brains that were having a random set of people. So this is the problem. I love this quote in the book. Story of how much of the world came to believe in something. So I interviewed Dr. Bartholomew and we talked about what that was all about. And he has a really good summary of what he said in his book. But anyway, so back to Wikipedia. How does Wikipedia have the cover this incident? Well, the Wikipedia page for Down syndrome has 4 million pages since its creation. Months after it all started, it's just the average. We had one more that was I looked at that in October, just this year. And besides individuals reading a Wikipedia article about something, journalists go there. And when they write a story about it, they go there and they say, oh, that's a Wikipedia article, it's a starting point. And so if the tone of a Wikipedia page on one of these subjects is very important, because it may reflect how the New York Times article is written, you know, about any subject. Same goes for psychics, by the way, only in the conspiracy. The name of the article about this in Wikipedia changed over time. Initially, it was Cuba sonic attack, right? It was clearly an attack and it was sonic light. That was the name of the article. That was all of the media. Well, as the sonic kind of went away, well, maybe it's not sonic, it's crickets, and maybe it's a microwave. Then they just called it health attacks. But then they really couldn't even prove their attack. So then it became a normal health incident. But the media often referred to it as that, a lot of syndrome, and that's the name that stuck. Right. So let's look at the current version. Oh, I showed you the early version of the Wikipedia article, which had air quotes about attacks and sonic weapons and things like that, and had the words mass psychogenic noise. The problem is Wikipedia has to go with reliable sources. And if the New York Times and the Washington Post and places like that report that these attacks actually happened, that's on the Wikipedia article. And for years, that's what was on the Wikipedia article. Right? The current Wikipedia article, after the final report on the US government and my team put this all on there, is about syndrome is a cluster of idiopathic symptoms, idiopathic meaning no physical cause. And it talks about where it happened, and it said that only a few dozen cases were announced, one of the thousands that had been reported. And this is both, by the way, you never have enough information about everything for something to pose, right? You dismiss thousands of cases, but you have like 2%, I don't know what they are, because the information isn't good enough. That doesn't mean that those who actually attack them level. And it turns out that in February last year, the State Department released the initial report, which said, we've been investigating this, and it's unlikely, despite what we've been saying, is that any directed energy attack happened. And then March of this year, 7 U.S. intelligence agencies completed their review and final report saying all the available evidence points against the involvement of any adversaries involved in the reports. Quite the turnaround. 7 years ago. So we had many fights, as I mentioned, but it's kind of hard to put the skeptical viewpoint in Wikipedia in those years because all of the reports in the media were about how these facts are real. So Dr. Bartholomew, who I talked about, he wrote that book, but having only a little bit on the page is okay. If you wanted any details from that book, you got a lot of pushback. And this was one of the Wikipedia editors saying, well, skeptical movement is known for UFOs and Bigfoot, but you can't be talking about medical stuff. Like stay in your lane, right? That's basically what that all says. Some topics are okay to reference skeptical fire, but not this is real medical stuff. So they also said, this got me. This is from the guy pushing back on having any skeptical content. Self-identified skeptics start believing in higher profile areas like this. They do classical paranormal topics, and it's likely they're going to start being seen as a bunch of irritating activist truth warriors. Nobody likes those people. So this is a reply from somebody on my team. They're fairly limiting the scope of scientific skepticism to traditional topics in the case of psychogenic illness, such as this case. This is something skeptics evaluate also on the basis of understanding biases, the understanding failings, And I went to so the US government had finally admitted that they were in fact no attacks. But not everyone like that, because for 6 years the snowball had been rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger. Some politicians absolutely will not accept this. Marco Rubio certainly has not. And here's a little report on that. He basically said, I don't care what the intelligence committee said, I know that it happened. The longer videos about sticking to the guns. And of course, the other category of people who are not going to drop the easily are the lawyers who have cases against the government for their clients who claim that they were attacked by weapons. This guy is fairly famous. Actually, I talked in a Zoom talk about this, and somebody said, I don't Mark. And he tells me this is true. Yeah, okay. So you listen to the lawyer, both the scientists and the committees who have investigated this for years. So this guy represents dozens of officials of the intelligence government officials suing the government. And he says, but it's very difficult to understand how they can reach such categorical denial. All of my clients tell me is that so many clients and they've been demoralized by this assessment. We'll skip that one. So on the larger level, where society was affected, where diplomats were expelled, governments got it at its throats because of this. There's also a personal point I want to make out. I don't know if people have heard of targeted individuals, as most people have not. The New York Times had an article some years ago claiming there were 10,000 in the United States. And by personal experience, I know somebody who knows one of these. I can't believe it's only 10,000. I would think it's more than that, too larger than that. So these are people who call themselves targeted individuals. They believe psychologists say they have a paranoid delusion that they are the center of attention of surveillance or attack by forces unknown. And these aren't people who are in the defense industry or anything like that. This could be a supermarket clerk or stay-at-home mom. But they believe for some reason they're important enough for the combined might of the government or some mystical agency to be on them all the time. If they go out to shop or they go to a restaurant, everyone else in the restaurant is not there because they went to the restaurant on their own. They were told in advance they were going and there was bail and taking them something. And then when they go back home, if something was moved or they don't remember putting down something where they start thinking, well, someone was in the house, we're playing with the buck back. My friend's son did this. He would take apart the smoke detector for the television set, thinking people. So these people now have evidence that they've been attacked, and this is them protesting, right? These are not diplomats. These are people who just have had this delusion for decades or more. And now this is proof, because hey, it's happening to diplomats, but because it's been happening to me for my life. And unfortunately, this used to be something someone had in private. Now, there are Facebook groups, these people getting together, it's like the flat earthers, and they reinforce their beliefs. And these people go on Wikipedia, the Havana syndrome page, and say, hey, you're wrong about mass psychoanalysis on this, because I know, because I was attacked. That doesn't stand on the page for a second, but they believe it's real. So it seems the cases that we've all looked at here are cases of not real attacks, right? And those three are just a short set I pulled out. There are an uncountable number of cases throughout history. So in many cases, interestingly, are attributed to supernatural causes. So none of those three happen. Sometimes what you attribute something to is dependent on the culture. You can see monkeys who run around the streets of India. In India, no one likes the Iranian government, less than people who are there. And the United States, we had just clear relationship from the previous administration with Cuba, and the government didn't like that. So they were just so open to this being attacked by a foreign government because they didn't like it. So let's go through some other cases in history. There's a Wikipedia article. There's some conspiracy cases going all the way back, Middle Ages, and all the ones that I've talked about today are on there. And there's a whole ton of other ones. So dancing mania happened in the 14th to 17th century. People just couldn't stop dancing. I mean, to some point where they killed themselves. They didn't. I don't know if you know about this. This is the America's own thing. Benjamin Franklin glass harmonic. I don't know the type of. Sometimes it's written harmonic, but It's a spinning balls if you wet them, and he constructed this and sold a lot of them. It became the big thing in that period of time in America in the 1750s, 60s, 70s, I think, for concerts and playing things. And initially, the sound was so angelic that people thought they were getting killed. So here we were with the ceiling effect. People claimed I went in with some problem and I came out after that concert and never had it again. Right? Well, one of the famous players of the instrument got ill and died. And then the story started going, oh, that was because of the sound. And then people who were at concerts being played by other people started to, and the illness they had was because of the sound. Well, you know, that instrument went bye-bye. Right. There is a London monster where the sound sort of like the Monkey Man, except it's more like a person. People were stabbed and stuck with pins and needles all around London in the 1780s. And also in that area in the 1830s, there was this sound more like the Monkey Man, some creature who could spring heal because he could jump tall buildings in a single bound, who would attack people and then disappear. Also had clawed hands and eyes that resembled red balls of fire. Sounds familiar. Again, in the UK, Halifax lecture. This is from the 1920s. So these things tended to last for weeks or months and just disappear with no one caught. This is an American case. This is in the middle of World War II, when soldiers were being gassed on the battlefield. And people in Illinois thought that they were being gassed in their homes. After the first report was made and publicized in the newspaper, more and more people were reporting the same thing. As the last sentence says, attacks are widely considered a case of necessary. Some people think that it's industrial pollution. Well, that is actually the same thing. That basically, this is probably what happened to the schoolgirls in Iran. Somebody in the school smelled something bad because they were cooking outside or something, gas leak, and they got sick, and that was associated to toxic substances, and more people got sick because the nocebo effect. So that may have been happening. This is another not so funny case. People left themselves. Like it was 62. This is one of these incidents, the 1982 West Bank epidemic. This is similar to the current situation in Iran with the schoolgirl poisoning. Again, it was schoolgirls claiming that they had been attacked. The conclusion at the last sentence there, supported by the health official, 20% of the girls may have been poisoning gas, but the 80% of the side was attack. And again, the gas probably wasn't intentional. It was something that seemed odd with people breathed in and thought was poison. This is a more modern thing from 1997. This one's a mixed bag. If you download something from the internet on Netflix or Amazon, there's always a warning about photosensitive people, and you might be triggered to an epileptic seizure by flashing lights. Well, apparently that's a real thing. It's 90% of the population. But in this one case, there was a Pokemon episode which had thousands of people going to hospitals. And not all at once. First, initially, there was some, and then when it hit the media, the next day, more people. So this is largely seen as some case that was exaggerated, which is now part of the current warning on everything. Maybe you're likely anyway, in cases of few people who are, but this is one of these cases where the numbers were odd in proportion to how we know it actually works in the population. And I added this talk to about fear specifically, and for recovery from emotion, talk about this idea. I left this out of Psychogenic. We try to avoid religious topics, but there are a lot of supernatural cases of something happening necessary. You can attribute the witch trials in Europe, which killed upwards of maybe even more than 60,000 executions to sort of a social panic, mass hysteria. Then the ones that maybe more familiar with in this country over a very short period of time in Salem, execution of 20 citizens, because people were saying that they were witches. Right, and this is even in Wikipedia says that actually one of America's most notorious cases of mass hysteria. In Germany, there's an outbreak of students learning in trance in another area of places that called the witch. In Malaysia, bringing it more into modern times, mass hysteria affected again school age girls, young factors, outbreak of spirits were having possessed in the opposed to the government poison state. Then there's, people might know about this, the Martin Days trial, 1980s, 90s, right? The satanic panic it was called, charging daycare providers of several forms of child abuse, which everyone was found not guilty, but after living their lives. In Brunei, I had not heard of this. In 2010, mass hysteria occurred again in all secondary schools. There was panic, students affected by a lot of things, and in this case, it was spirits, where the jinn, which is like a demon of Muslim women, screaming, shaking, thinking about it. In Malaysia, long ago, 12 girls, national secondary school, again, screaming, claiming, face pure evil. Right? Again, supernatural spirits would like they cut down a tree, it's all that. And then witchcraft accusations go on right now in Africa, have received increasing international attention, even in this century. There's witch hunts in many countries there, and the problem is on the rise. Charismatic preachers, as well as organized poverty, conflict, and fragmented communities, all sorts of problems. But it's often said that it's some kind of witchcraft that's happening. There is a Wikipedia article named Witchcraft Accusations Against Children in Africa, if you're interested in that subject. There's also this person named Igwe a long advocacy for alleged witches. He's a skeptic in Nigeria who fights his prominent in home country. This is one of the meetings that just a few months ago they had. Flying witches. You know what I mean? Hunting destiny. Penis disappearance. Soul exchange. Husband wives back. So yeah, they have to talk about, no, this is not much better. This happened just at the beginning of last month. Came to school, 95 schoolgirls again, in a Muslim country, experienced sudden paralysis. In this case, we jumped on it really quickly saying, this is hysteria, it's not spirits or something else. But it was kind of dangerous because for the weeks it was in the news, it was said possibly to be from COVID vaccination. And, you know, all probably getting people vaccinated properly. So this probably stop people from getting boosted. So in conclusion, mass psychogenic illness, social panic, all those other words I showed before, those situations are due to stress and fear, and they happen disturbingly frequently, as you saw. And they can have serious societal consequences, either to society or personally, like they're targeted individuals, or people who claim to have attacks. There's one thing I mentioned. One thing that was discussed is if you're told that you were attacked by these weird weapons and that's why you have migraine, it's harder to get over it according to the psychologist than if you understand what's really caused, because you won't go for the threat's help. Right? No culture seems to be exempt. And the solution, better education about these situations in the appropriate fields, particularly medical doctors, politicians, and journalists, desperately needed to minimize the severity of these kinds of events. Thank you.
Mike, see you. Okay, I guess I'll go to the, I have a question myself, but I'll go to the audience first. Any questions?
So let's just say that migraine is actually poisoned by
Did everything interrupt?
they actually poisoned 5 young girls, okay? And so thousands report, and then the government says mass hysteria, mass hysteria. Investigators come in and confirm mass hysteria. So the manipulation can exist by calling everything fake news for them.
It could, but then you have to go by all of those other cases of the schoolgirls in all the other countries, also other reasons over decades, all the same answer. Yeah. So it's the fact that like there are certain red flags that indicate and lack of evidence here. Go get pretty good.
But what he was saying is that
a small incident of actual poisoning could be covered up by a larger mass psychogenic illness incident.
Yeah, it's hard to prove a negative, but why would that happen?
And I guess that,
And the same thing with the Havana syndrome. Yeah, they could have targeted 2 people, maybe those were real, and all the thousands that suffered afterwards and fake.
it's like you'll have like some sort of crime wave where there'll be an initial incident that had a more typical cause, and then there'll be like copycats. Right. And the copycats are a phenomenon of copycatting, but the original incident had some other, right, to do, motivation.
As with a lot of things in reality and science, you gotta go with what's in your life. And the evidence just doesn't point to those things being real. You could also say the monkey man was real and scratched 3 people, but not all the rest of them. But does that make any sense?
Yeah, that definitely, that's what I'm done. But I guess that leads to a broader question. Are there examples where mass psychogenic illness was a conventionally accepted explanation for a phenomenon, and then later people said, "Oh wait, actually this is the case."
Not that I'm aware of, because that diagnosis, mass hysteria, mass psychogenic illness, social panic, is people do not want to accept that, so they don't accept that first. It basically is like 7 years ago, can't prove something, so okay, that's what it is. They haven't even said that to the government. It's just, we don't know if about it. Maybe they don't do the actual stuff. But, you know, people don't want to accept it. They don't want to accept that people can think they're sick and there's essentially something from its thoughts, as opposed to, especially the lawyers don't say that, right? And or it was just something else and not the thing pointing at. It's almost never the case. I was surprised about that when they showed me that happened early last month, where, you know, a month they were already saying that almost never happens. It's always something else you're pointing at. It's spirits, it's whatever, rather than it's just in your mind, essentially.
We don't know, Steve. That was real.
Yeah, that was real.
Yeah. I didn't know about
Yeah, I don't remember how that was revealed or what the story was. I don't know if anyone said it was mass psychogenic illness or anything like that. I think the story just got released that people were being experimented. And it's not to say there are never any conspiracies. Conspiracy just means more than one person talking to each other to do something bad. That's true.
And the question, why do you, what your thought process, say young girls are more
Not me, no, the psychologist say.
yeah, I mean, why do you think they would say that?
Oh, because the effects of this are more profound on people who feel the least empowered to do anything about changing what I'm certain. That's what they're saying. And in the northern country, women for sure, and young girls are even worse. So that's why.
Another, when it comes to my mind, I'm sure you remember being in school and you had, daughters just around the start of puberty, maybe a little bit before that, 6th grade, maybe 4th grade, young girls seem to discover their ability to influence others socially and start to form cliques and start to persecute one, pick on some girls or whatever, and get all this, sort of the formation of a pecking order, which is very naturally, it's not just girls. The girls are still stereotyped. So it may be that as they're becoming aware of that, as they're becoming aware that they're being affected by other people socially and their status can rise and lower stuff, I think that makes them more prone to this sort of thing. I mean, that's just my.
So one thing I didn't show, by the way, is you may be aware on TikTok, is this friend with claiming to have silent tics and following, making new emotions and whatever. And that's also medical. You don't see young guys.
I really have the diplomats who were initially involved with this change their mind, or what did they feel?
I guess that's a good question. I don't know. If there were, it's not recorded anywhere. There's certainly people with the lawsuits. At least some of them are still going through with it. In that 60 Minutes report, the one at the White House, claimed to be nauseous and dizzy sitting on his desk, and then there was a woman coming down the stairway and she almost collapsed. And, they were in that report claiming no other explanation for this. So interestingly, 6 months or so ago, I have a personal friend who reported sitting on his front porch out in some rural Montana or something, where no one else lives except him and his chickens. And he had something go weird with his brain. Started not being able to speak properly, he got dizzy. His family took him to the hospital. We tested, they found nothing, and he recovered. If he was a diplomat somewhere, under these circumstances, absolutely, I've seen by some secret law. So people have these ailments. In fact, one of the first people who reported the sound in Cuba, Dr. Bartholomew in Baylor, talked about what he was talking about was tinnitus. He said in his house, he reached down to pick up his kid and he felt a swishing in his head. And then he went to the other bed to pick up the other kid and he had the same swishing. And then they got away from the windows. And he said, this is the definition of what happens when people have tinnitus, and a lot of people get tinnitus. And if you Google it, I hear swishing in my head, I hear warbling in my head, you'll get it. People don't do that. And they went through this extravagant excuse because he heard the noise outside and reported it. And it was a crickets, but he thought it was some sonic weapon.
I'm curious if you're aware of any literature or research into the connection between like mass psychogenic illness and like smaller groups, say for example religious groups or congregations, or where there are behaviors where everyone seems to be experiencing, say, the spirit of God, or even individuals that claim to have an illness or injury for years, and they in fact do not have any evidence from any medical professional. And then all of a sudden they're cured because something happened in their life and they're installed 75.
Yeah, there's certainly connection.
So are you aware of anything connecting that kind of, like the smaller scale group?
Well, so the first thing you mentioned, which was like, I would say, like, if you go into a Pentecostal church, feeling the spirit of habitude, everyone feels that. If you've grown up in it and you're learning what that looks like in the game, you just get up to people say they were told to take it to the bank. Right. And that's certainly connected with something else. I mean, that's been called abandonment. The human bias.
I'm just curious whether you're aware of anything, particularly looking at that as a human phenomenon.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been psychological studies on it.
Well, would you say that this was more of a modern phenomenon spread by the media? And if that video did not exist, we wouldn't see this other than tiny.
So which is this? The Havana syndrome?
Yeah.
The last one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, all the three things I talked about, the much of man divided, so all happened in modern age, but certainly there was media, the social media, in fact, maybe even days back to 2001. And so that has made this way worse. That's true, right? Because it used to be in a nunnery, it happened, or one little village, the dancing epidemic, or things like that. It was just your social circle where you would see these things going on, and then it would happen. Now the world is so connected that it can happen anywhere. And the Havana syndrome is probably the one that spread the largest, because if you were to believe the initial attacks, 30 countries had U.S. diplomats and other members of the Pentagon, CIA attacked in hotels and their homes, all over the place. And how would that happen? Because the U.S. government told them to look out for such a thing when before them, right? So it was something that had spread as an understandable concept, and I should be aware of this, as opposed to in the old days, in the Middle Ages, it was just the people in your town, so it went on further than that. This gentleman had a question. Oh, okay.
What about all these UFO reports?
Hey, thank you for bringing that up.
You've got some pretty questionable people, like airline pilots, commercial and military.
So I would suggest watching the movie, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, which was released this year by my friend Brian Dunning and Skeptic Podcast. It was screened at Sci-fi, and it was the first that I'm aware of scientific investigation of these questions that's ever been done in the document. The UFO movie, They, capital They, Don't Want You to See. And it explores some famous cases, what are the facts about them. And then it talks about scientific evaluation of whether the things claimed are in fact even possible. So that's the gist of the movie.
Because a lot of these objects that you see move at physically impossible.
Yeah, so no, they don't. So my other friend, Nick West, his site is metabunk.com. He writes for Skeptical Inquirer and has been on CNN and ABC and CBS as the skeptical voice for the 10-second response after they have someone say that. And it turns out, no, if you analyze it, that's just not true. It looks like they're doing that, but they're not.
And what's the name again?
Metabunk.com. His name is Metabunk. His name is Mick West. You can find him that way too. And he's written several books, one of which is Escaping the Rabbit Hole, How to Deal with Friends Who Believe in Conspiracy Theories. He's a subtitle of it, Escaping the Rabbit Hole. He has got a podcast called Tales from the Rabbit Hole. He interviews people, including the people who made these UFO sightings from the Navy, who's been on his podcast. So the bottom line there is these are misinterpretations of the data. And the most disappointing person to me is scientist, physicist, Michio Kaku. The ways people don't expect, and now I know what to do. Not the least of which he went to my university, but he was quoted as saying, this is almost exactly what I was writing. It used to be that the believers in UFOs had to prove that they were extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now there is so much evidence, it is the government's job to prove it not. And if anyone understands the burden of proof, that's exactly reversed. Every other skeptic and scientist says, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't know what's going through his head. And he shows those videos on his own TikTok. How could something move this fast? Well, it's a parallax issue. If something is close to you and you're zoomed by it, and the camera looks like it's going super fast. And that's what the data on the screen actually shows. It shows how far away the thing is. It shows how far the sea is. And Mick West had a great video, which is shown in that UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. He hung a tennis ball from a tree limb in his yard, and he walks by it with the camera, and it looks like a tennis ball is moving through the yard. It's just hanging from a tree. That's the explanation for the go fast. And all of the other Navy videos have explanations equivalent to that. It's unfortunate that the right people don't look at it. People who already believe that they want to say, that the UFOs, that they're extraterrestrial, in other words, are the ones who are given the data to look at, and you don't hear the skeptical viewpoint, which is, no, this is the easy explanation. In fact, there was a movie called The Phenomenon, which was from 2 years ago. I started to watch it. It's a pro-UFO show. These are all indications of no other explanation. After 10 minutes, I had to shut it off because it was so ridiculous. Because I had looked at these stories and we would Google the Rendell and Forest incident explanation. What is an explanation? But they don't want you to know that because they want you to buy the video or spend time watching it. And there's no other explanation for this. And that's just not true. That's one of the stories of Rendell and Forest that gets talked about in UFO movie they don't want to see. Anyway. Okay.
Well, I think there's another explanation for some of the things that seem to be going too fast. And that is, say I have a flashlight and I show a spot on one like that. And we watch the spot, you will think it's going much too fast. So it's possible there are other illusions.
Yeah, good point. There are plenty of illusions. And one of the worst things that you hear in the UFO thing is, it's a pilot. How could a pilot make a mistake? So part of the movie that I wanted to say, Brian Dunning interviews people who train pilots. And, you know, do you teach them about these optical illusions and things like that? No. They're just people flying a plane. It's like they have no special training in recognizing what would be an optical illusion than you would. And yeah, it was pilots don't make mistakes. But, you know, and in fact, one of the funny lines is, the only thing the pilot really cares about is not hitting something. I see a funny thing, well, okay, I don't care what's happening. I don't get it.
Aren't those people who think that they've been followed, targeted? Isn't there a name for that? It's called schizophrenia.
I schizophrenia, I'm not surprised. If you imagine things that aren't there and see them, really, I don't matter if see anything. It's more this paranoia, and this is not schizophrenia, it's going to be paranoid. I mean, I know there's paranoia there. I don't know enough to say this.
Paranoia is not confined to schizophrenia.
Yeah,
It's not good to go around.
So my personal experience with this is my wife was a psychotherapist, and she had a client who, after the session was over in her office, gave her an envelope and said, "Oh, what's this?" And my wife started off, "No, don't open it here, open it at home." And it closed it up. Wow, okay. So she brought it home to me, and I'm not gonna stick anything in the computer before I scanned it. So I did that. It was full of hundreds and maybe thousands of pages that she got from the internet about other clubs, proving that she's a targeted individual and this is going on all across the world. Pictures of devices taken apart to look for bugs and implants in people's arms and all of this stuff. It was very sad. Because what is my wife supposed to say to her? No, you're delusional. Goodbye, I'm not coming to you because you're part of the conspiracy, right? If you go to a doctor which gives you drugs, why should you take the drug? The drugs might have a microchip in it. So it's like, it's really a horrible situation because it's almost impossible to make these people off.
It's like complete lack of trust.
Yep. Anyone who says anything about what you already believe, and you have evidence to believe it, is in on trying to convince you of a lie. So, yeah. And when I said talking, I know two people. The other one was I worked with somebody who was an older son with the home 30s, 40s from my gather. You know, not confident enough to hold the job because of this. So my friend would go home, go on and wonder where they find take them apart today. And I would take them apart with smoke detectors and TV sets and whatever. And we wouldn't take the drugs that, you know, we had made another psychiatrist. So yeah, reading the stories about the Chronic syndrome for 7 years would not help any people.
Yeah, it's better if those people also know how to put the TV set back together. Apparently they never do that. It was over my friend who had to do it. Luckily he's an engineer. Anyone? Well, that was a very fun question. It's a very, very interesting presentation. Thank you very much.